Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. And on today's episode, we talk Arsenal battering Man City and highlight the youngsters saving Arteta's season. Then it's on to Marcus Rashford to Villa. Is this worth the huge outlay? Plus transfers to Tottenham and West Ham as the window closes. That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So we are back for another episode. This is the last episode actually happening in the transfer window. I'm joined by Ted Knutson. How are you doing, Ted?
I feel like we might end up with an emergency pod tomorrow if something really crazy happens.
Sure. Well, hopefully something crazy does happen. I mean, like, look, we've seen, it looks like Mathys Tel, we'll talk about him a bit later. It looks like he's reversed his position on Spurs being shit, which, is an embarrassing climb down, obviously. But to be honest, while we've got some transfer news, we do have to start with the actual biggest game of the weekend. The biggest game of the weekend, which features two teams who will not win their league. So Arsenal, Man City at the Emirates. And it was one of those games where everybody, when you look at the scoreline now, you kind of think, well, we all talked ourselves into this being like a really close match on the basis that it's Manchester City. But if you looked at the two teams going into this game, this isn't that crazy a result.
It's not that crazy, although it feels like the first time that Arsenal have posted like a real signature win, like a beatdown of a big team in ages. Like they've been able to grind out results. And in fact, like in the last like 17 or 18, they're like 10 and 8 and 0 or something. So like not losing against the big teams, like winning more than half of those and then drawing. Yeah, we forget about a lot of that. And this season's been a pretty scruffy one. But yeah, I think in the gambling roundup, I was like, ooh, I don't feel like it's time to bet City just yet. Like, let's wait on that because they still just don't have control. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and retract part of that because they did only give up like 1.2 expected goals against Arsenal. They had what? They had a deflection that made it 2-1 off of a long-range Partey shot. So, like, there's a bit of luck finally in Arsenal's favor. And then just magnificent finishing for the team that could not finish for about 3 weeks straight. Now it's all regressed and they get a 5-1 result against a City that's not there yet, but you can see like the pieces starting to come together.
Well, you hope you can. I mean, like, look, Arteta came out after the game and he was like, a lot of stuff went our way today. And I think it's impossible to escape that, like the finishing clearly, but also they shelled really, really deep in that first half after the Havertz miss, and they didn't get punished for it. But like 6 of City's 7 shots in this game came in that half-hour period where they were just sitting deep. And then obviously Haaland scores, and they immediately go 2-1 up. So they're playing with a goal advantage for all of the game, bar like 2 minutes.
It's like Liverpool's entire season.
Yeah, exactly. But that said, I mean, with City, look, City didn't give up huge XG, but they did give up chances in basic of pretty much every possible kind. They gave up chances off pressure regains. They gave chances on counters, chances in settled possession. For the Lewis-Skelly goal, you could not call it any kind of good performance.
I don't remember any time except for the last couple of years, the last 2 years in particular, where it felt like City got possession blown up like they do this year. And maybe in Champions League moments there have been some sort of crazy elements of it, but it feels like this year teams are really willing to tee off against City with the press, and Arsenal had just so much joy off of it. Like they got deep regains. It looked like Chelsea trying to build up, except for in this case it was a lighter blue, and I think that is. One, it's something that Arsenal have gotten to be quite good at. They know how to press now. They've got the physicality to win those 1v1 duels to make it more likely for them to get like quick ones. And they always have a second player that knows to be there looking for that regain, so they get the open shot. So that was like really almost the tail of it. Only 7 shots given up against City, which, as you said, like 6 came in a half-hour period where they were 1 goal up and decided to shell, which is a really stupid way to play. We've talked about that before, but they can't seem to get them to avoid that very often. And then, yeah, like sometimes you're going to finish well. Sometimes you're teenagers. You're going to score 2 goals, and you look like a genius.
Well, I mean, everything. Like not just finishing well, but like Arsenal completed 9 of 11 dribbles they attempted in this game. Like, if you do that, if you're just constantly beating your man, like that's how it's going to go sometimes. And I mean, yeah, it was a really good game, I thought, for the conversation we've had before, which is your normal defense is designed to give up 0 goals. So you don't actually need to defend, like it's like the Nazis holding people off from their final bunker. Like, you don't need to just drop deeper and deeper and deeper like this, because as soon as they started kind of playing, City just had zero ability to stop anything at all. And Lewis-Skelly, I think, is someone we really do need to talk about, right? Because Arsenal, we were talking about this early in the season. You were saying Arteta has not been very good at bringing through the academy players. And despite the fact these academy players have come through now, that feels a little bit more luck than it was perfectly planned.
I think the two teenagers have basically saved Arsenal's season. If you take those two kids out and you make them go with the current squad as it exists, like they're suffering, right? They have no depth. You're putting like a Kieran Tierney that's clearly washed out there. You're having to play Sterling more, and he got injured, and clearly Arteta isn't super excited about playing Sterling. We thought he'd be more so, but I think that, and my son said this, so I'm going to give the 15-year-old full credit, full marks. When he scored last week in the Champions League, he's like, you know what? If Yamin Lamal did not exist right now, like people would be looking and a spotlight would be on Nwaneri. It's probably good that Yamin like has the entire spotlight, because you don't have 17 and 18-year-old kids that are changing games in the Premier League on a regular basis. And these two guys don't look like squad kids. They look like they could be like right on the cusp of first team. You're not just filling minutes when you're up by 3 goals here. Like they're playing real genuine minutes against real genuine teams, and they're doing it every week. And in some cases they're scoring. Nwaneri, I think, is one of the best strikers of the ball that I've seen in recent times, especially sort of as a midfield slash, creative wide forward. Then you get Lewis-Skelly, who was brought in, and he's basically acting as a left back because he's got the correct foot for that. He scores a spectacular non-dominant foot goal.
Yeah.
And that's because his reality is he's probably an 8-10 that is going to play as that missing midfielder that Arsenal sort of keep trying to sign a player for that. If he's the natural fit for it, that's amazing. It harkens back to me like what happened when Liverpool went on their run, and Trent was the foundation that brought in like the entirety of the Klopp era. Like you've got an 18-year-old, you didn't have to pay for him. He ends up being one of the best creative passers in the world that has like this amazing long ball ability, this amazing delivery ability, and it just triggers so much stuff that you did not have to pay for. And because you didn't have to pay for it, that means you can focus your money elsewhere. And then you get occasional kids that come through the academy and are able to do that. Now, I'm not saying these kids are Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm not saying they're one of the best 3 players in their positions for the future. But there's indications that they might be. And that is a gift from the Hale end that will definitely serve Arsenal very well, especially if it continues to sort of be that productive. When you have an academy that can produce a world-class player every other year, like that saves you so much money. It lets you run on a budget that is very unusual.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that part of it, but like what's interesting about them as well is that these two guys, as well as Bukayo Saka, there is something that their ability to use their strength to kind of ride a challenge, their ability to wriggle out of pressure, and especially with Lewis-Skelly and Saka, I would say what I find stunning about them is that mentally they seem so far ahead of where you expect them to be at their age. I always think years ago. In fact, I think I may have remember you discussing this in the early days of the Stats Bomb podcast. You guys were talking about young players. And it was that one of the things that stood about Rooney when he came through was that Rooney obviously had like the body of like a grown adult, but he also had decision making of a much, much older player. It feels like Lewis-Skelly and Saka have that. Nwaneri may have it, but I haven't seen as much of it yet. He's just not as influential in possession.
When the game that's the Premier League level isn't as fast as it actually is, when they process it faster than players normally seem to, that's when you're like, wow, I'm impressed. And part of that is the quality of the academy that you're coming out of. Like, look, for example, Kushinov, right? Like Kushinov got very yippy the first time he comes out. Like you could see that like it was just a lot. These guys come in, they've been in training with Arsenal players, and it's just like, yeah, whatever, we got this. Like, we're going to play real fast. Like, we're used to playing fast. Like, we're used to the big bodies around us, and it's not scary. And when you're comfortable with that level of pace, and I'm not saying like, the speed of the players necessarily, but the speed of the game and the speed of decision making that's necessary in order to stay on top of that. Like that's remarkable. And Barcelona are another place to do it, right? Like we've seen a ton of kids come out of their academy, immediately fit into the first team in the second best league in the world. And sometimes it's the first best league in the world if you look at full depth of like how good they've been. So very unusual, and partly like a lot due to the quality of the training that they're getting, but also like, it's not every kid that's able to come out of there. A lot of them need, years in League Two, League One,
Yeah.
the Championship in order to build up to that. Like Louis Barry went on loan. He got yanked out of a League One club. He's a Villa player. He again got put into a Championship loan for the rest of this half season, and he's really good. But they felt he needed to do that. They didn't just bring him back up to the first team and be like, "Oh, he's awesome." I mean, he might be. Maybe they should have taken that decision, but like that's not the normal pathway.
Sure. So these guys, if they can be even just useful members of the first team squad for the next couple of years, then that is a huge bonus that you wouldn't have otherwise got. On Lewis-Skelly, as you say, he's a midfielder playing left back. He's been outstanding at left back in kind of all phases of play. Like he looks really, really good. Well, I guess less in attack, but he's doing build-up stuff. In the past, a player excelling in that position would have moved forward and forward and forward, the kind of Gareth Bale trajectory. Given how important fullbacks are, given that you can do midfield stuff as a fullback, is there an argument to keep him there? Or do you think he will just end up shifting into that left 8 role and that'll be his job forever?
Didn't we have this conversation with the guy who plays in the right wing that started at left back?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that right wing position is a little more valuable. I agree. Like that's probably the most valuable. So the most unusual profile to find an elite player at because of the left-footed and because everything you have to do up there. I think that his versatility is super useful. I think that part of it depends on how the summer goes with, do they actually think Marino is like even a medium-term answer? Like, are they potentially shipping him back to Spain? Like Partey's not sticking around, presumably. Yeah, I think that there are a lot of difficult answers that are still yet to come there, but the flexibility that those players offer them is crucial. And again, it just makes your life as a squad builder so much easier because it means basically you can have like 3 positions that you're hiring for, you're looking for players for, and if you land like your elite one in this one, then you're like, all right, we've got backup and we've got cover here. And here's the crazy thing that like frustrates me. Like fans will always complain about something, right? Like they just always do. There's always something that's imperfect, something that I probably could have done better in the summertime. But like there's a limited budget and some players don't want to come and some players aren't actually available. And sometimes, the agents are just not willing to they don't even pick up the phone. And if they don't pick up the phone, like you can't make an offer. Like you have to like chisel away on that stuff. So, I think what you're seeing is like over years, like you see the proficiency of the team, but like the fans are always like, I want to win now. Arsenal in win now mode. Why aren't they spending 60 million on Ollie Watkins, who wasn't really available? That was just a set of rumors that were floated to sort of get the John Duran deal over the line and get more money, et cetera, et cetera. You don't know, right? And we talked about this in the newsletter. We talk about this in the podcast. You don't really know what the reality is. Like I get some back channel information from time to time, but even then, like a lot of us is like looking at the tea leaves, adding things up. That's clearly an agent play. That's clearly a club. Like Mathys Tel, right? Like you've got 2 different. Here's Mathys Tel and here's Nico Gonzalez. Nico Gonzalez today is like the first time that we've even heard that name in the transfer window, right? Like has even come up. And then Ornstein's out there saying, yeah, Manchester City are really close. I said 2-3 weeks ago, it's like City are moving in silence right now. And you don't even hear about these deals until they're right about to happen, right? And then within a week, they're wrapped up. That's the right way to do it. Mathys Tel, you hear about it because one, Bayern want they want an auction. They want to get as much money. And his agent wants as much noise out there as possible. 2 different angles, 2 different sets of teams going for it. One is a sell side set of noise that they're trying to drum up a lot of stuff. Rashford, classically, a lot of reasons. We'll talk about him in a minute, but a lot of reasons for people to want to get him out and to get the best deal possible. But then the other side is like the best teams are typically moving in silence. They grab the player when they want to. Sometimes it happened 6 months ago and you never knew about it. It was just a matter of timing. And then once it happens, it happens. It's fans are always frustrated about stuff. Tim Keach said that the people running your club are not nearly as dumb as you think they are. That's true in about 80% of the cases.
But I also just think like there are Arsenal fans who are simultaneously annoyed that everything seems to be going Liverpool's way this year, and also annoyed that the club isn't dropping £60 million on average to good players, and they don't seem to see any tension between these 2 propositions. Like
I kind of love accounts like George Bird, who's the Arsenal Academy guy for like decade. Chelsea Youth as well, who are always fighting for the academy guys. And Chelsea Youth was like way ahead of the curve for like so many years. Like, why aren't our players getting more playing time? They're very good. Why? And the answer has never really been answered. And we continued to see great Chelsea players from the academy become great players elsewhere, but not at Chelsea.
Okay, so Arsenal have three players better than Lamine Yamal. I think that's where we're going to leave that section and move on to Marcus Rashford.
The YouTube shorts are going to love that. Like, please say exactly the same thing about Crash Guehi. And the Georgians are like bumping up our hits constantly there in the YT.
What are they going to do? Okay.
Sell you wine. Really delicious underpriced wine.
Rashford to Villa. Let's get out of Georgia.
Let's whine about that.
Rashford to Villa. Okay. This has been rumbling along for a while. It kind of felt like Rashford was going to end up sticking around because Juve had a sniff and thought no, Barca had a sniff and then like realized they have no money. But in the end, Villa are going in. Looks like they're going to cover minimum 70% of his wages, which is going to be 210 to 250k a week. They're giving him a loan to the end of the season, but this deal also has an optional buy clause of £40 million with a 3.5-year contract pre-agreed. Which is funny. And I think they're also wrapping up Asensio on a straight loan, who's also going to be like 250k a week. That guy earns so much money. So this is going to cost Villa something like 6 to 8 mil, I guess, for the rest of the season. These two players, one who's 29, one who's 27. Is either one of them good anymore? Don't know. But Monchi, the genius, he's apparently decided that these players are gonna, I don't know what, take Villa up into the top 5, lead them to Champions League glory. I can't work it out.
I feel like you're setting a bear trap for me, and it's just gonna chomp the bottom of my leg off if I step on it. Like, I mean, which parts of this am I allowed to comment on and not get myself into huge trouble? There's 0 sense of Villa paying 75% of Marcus Rashford's wages. If that's real, like, who the fuck and why, right? Mm-hmm. And why is always a good question. But I can't answer that and keep myself out of trouble. So like, let's leave that one alone. The Rashford thing, like, again, nobody wanted him. So like, if nobody actually wanted him, like, why aren't you getting a much better? Like, why aren't you paying a third of his wages like Arsenal did with Sterling? That would make at least a little more sense.
Yeah.
Asensio, I kind of still like, and I think that he might still be a pretty good player, and he's like remarkably versatile. So that's going, and he's talented. So versatile and talented is good. Obviously, the loan saves them sort of some protection. 250 a week's like, creeping up on a bit of a, maybe 20% of a real transfer there. So yeah, I think what Villa are trying to do is go for it. They're going for the Champions League. Like, yep, we're gonna do this. We needed to make the Jean Duran deal happen for PSR reasons because we're a little scared of that, and we've been a little profligate in recent years, and I guess they're not as ballsy as Chelsea are, or they're not just willing to like sell every asset that the club might have, including a women's team, to potentially comply with loophole PSR rules. Yeah, I mean that's the best take that I have. That's the best take that I have. The rest of it gets worse and ends up asking legal questions about why and who made these dumb decisions. But Monchi still doesn't allegedly know how to sort a spreadsheet. He can just hire people to do that.
I mean, I'd do that. That'd be fine. How much would they pay me at Villa? 250k a week.
That's even a year, right? You'd like short spreadsheets for 250k a year, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I totally do that.
I did that
for 250k. Yeah.
I don't want to talk about what I got paid, but it was in the neighborhood, in the ballpark.
I'm sorry, is that tasteless? Wait till people get to the B-roll. Like, this is where Knutson draws the line. Jesus Christ. Okay, yeah. I mean, look, if they want to do this, it's fine. They need some forward cover. Asensio has played quite a lot of centre forward minutes, and he's been trending more towards being a proper forward in the last couple of years, having been more of a creative guy previously. It just feels like they've also been linked with Joao Felix. I assume that's not happening now because God only knows if it is. But Villa, I feel like more than any other club, just get hoodwinked by prestige. When there's like a big name from a big club, Villa absolutely love it. They love it. And I mean, look, Asensio has been kind of crazy domestically. His domestic numbers are funny. It's like 8 expected goals in 600 minutes.
Used to be awesome at Real Madrid too, right? Sure. But the Premier League is not. He was really good. Yeah. He had some injuries. The Premier League is Premier League is not League and I honestly can't say more than that because every other comment that I would have is just going to get the show in trouble. Let's not do that.
I can do it. Can I do it?
No.
Okay. Well,
That's
look,
your other show. You can take all the
yeah.
B-roll stories and put it over there.
Tune into that next week because I did not enjoy these transfers. But I mean, look, the good thing is Asensio, he can't score 3 bangers and Villa decide to make it permanent because they don't have an option. Whereas my fear with Rashford is like Rashford has a couple of good games and Villa are like, yeah, we're going to do it. And it's a disaster. But
Send
look,
him to Upton Park.
do what you want, Villa. Do what you want. Okay, should we move on to Tottenham then? Because Tottenham have been going as hard as they can to get defenders through the door. They tried for Tomori, no. Tried for Disasi. He apparently wants to go to Villa. Apparently they had a 70 mil bid for Guehi turned down.
We should talk about that one.
Okay.
I mean,
Do you love it?
Was it like 45 million from Daniel Levy and then like a bag of chips that could turn into a pot of gold if a leprechaun farted out of his butt at the next North London derby? Is that what the actual offer was? Maybe it was 40. 40 is like a reasonable one for Palace to turn down, right? I mean, there are Palace fans that are looking at that rumor and being like, he's running out of contract. Why would we not? Like, why would we not? We're safe now. Why would we not? So yeah, if that rumor's true, like absolutely the fuck, why would we not? I don't believe that Daniel Levy actually offered that. It's a little bit like the
Mitoma.
Yeah, go ahead and tell people what I said on that one. I'll just
what it was just like the first bid was like 65 mil. The second bid was apparently they just added 25 mil to it, but Brighton turned it down. They were like, no, we're keeping this group together. And I think your point was
Brighton this weekend, who lost 7-0, like turned down a 90 million offer for Mitoma before the weekend happened. It's like, there's no fucking way that they did that. Like, they're not stupid. We've talked about, they're really, give them credit for at least one thing. They are really bright in the transfer market. They know when to sell. They know when to buy. They know where to buy from. So yeah, do you believe that they turned down 90 million for like a 27-year-old attacker that they probably have surplus and stashed all over Europe?
No. And then they just bought another forward as well. Like, I don't know. The kindest case you can make there is that like that bid was made and Mitoma said no thanks, and Brighton were like, we'll take the hit. Like that's the kindest case you can make. All the other cases are like bullshit.
That one's very believable. You know, maybe his translator forgot to clarify, but yeah, I believe that one.
An answer my phone. Yeah, I mean, look, Spurs have got a guy over the line. Actually, 2 guys. Yeah, Mathys Tel looks like he's gone there as well. And
strict
Kevin
loan,
Danso, straight loan. Yeah, I don't think he wants to go to Spurs permanently.
Well, why? Why would you do this? I don't like. First of all, if you loan him,
cups. Is that not it?
I guess. Like, if you loan him, then you're actually putting him in the shop window for Bayern for next time around when you can't afford him. If he's good, you can't afford him. If you keep him, the only ways you get to keep him is he's bad for you. So like, why? Maybe there's some other thing that's not reported that we don't know about. Like maybe like there's always things that we don't know about, right? Like the real details never come out. And actually like that would be fascinating. So like in the NBA, you know every detail of a player's contract, like at least the ones that are on the surface. So maybe there are other clauses that have to be in there because they have to be filed with the league office. Clearly, contracts for players also have to be filed with the league office. And sometimes I think, you know, maybe there are side deals because like sometimes, you know, players will sit out saying that they were lied to because there's a side deal that wasn't entered into a contract. It was just a gentleman's agreement that something would happen. So the Tell thing, I mean, I guess you're right. Cups is as good an explanation as the other. Kevin Danso is they're trying to get another center back that is regularly injured to fill in for their injured center backs. He's physically really good, but one of his issues is there was a great thread from Euro expert Alexander Barker on B-Sky that did really deep analysis because he kind of likes Lens and he's watched a bunch. So like he's got a lot of things that are to his credit, but one of his difficulties is 1v1 duels. And if you're a center back in Ange's system that's like sort of sometimes weak in 1v1 duels,
yeah, I know. Like it just and they paid 25 mil for him, so it's not nothing. And he's 26, so this is what he is. Like it's like he's a player. I think he's going to be better than Dragusin. but it does not like fill me with excitement. That said, I think Spurs should, I think you talked about this in the roundup. Spurs should be entering a better moment now. Like they should be getting some guys back. There should be fewer people in the red zone. And, early in the season, they were motoring. And this weekend, they got that somewhat lucky win against Brentford. Brentford were clearly the better side. But at the same time, Spurs have had so much bad luck in close games this season that they are kind of owed one.
I think that Spurs will be okay as people come back to health. That's an academy that I thought used to be better, and it feels like they've fallen off a bit. I feel like they haven't had like a great production line. Maybe some of their best players have gotten stolen from elsewhere. I'm not sure. Maybe they had some changeover at the academy level. Yeah, I mean, Spurs are certainly a team that have minutes to be able to give to academy players, even if they haven't necessarily been able to do that. The price at 25 million says that he's either a bit of a medium gamble to take a starting position as needed, or he's really a backup, right? And so if they see him as a backup, then that's probably an acceptable deal. One thing the Spurs rarely do is they make a mistake on price, right? They probably miss out on good players because of price, like Marmouche, but they rarely like screw up the other way around and they pay too much. And so that's something that mostly protects them, because it means that if players wash out, then they can move them on easier. And so many teams can't do that.
I do wonder as well if at some point, like they might try a back three. It's like that fits their fullbacks. It fits Romero. It fits the fact that they've got kind of crappy central midfielders. Like that might work for them. Maybe.
I think that the back three is actually gonna become more prominent over the course of the next 18 months. I think the teams. So if basically you have to decide what your likely identity is for this year and next year. Like you look at your squad, which is hard to change and it takes time. You look at your coach and you say, okay, are we kind of just happy to scrap for mid-table and maybe spike a Nottingham Forest season? In which case, like being a difficult to beat back three team is potentially quite good. Or are we like, going to be like legit, or we have a really good coach that we like that has like a different coaching identity. If we think we're going to be like elite and we don't have a coach that like loves that style, then like don't do that. But what we've seen this year is that some teams that were falling apart found solidity through the back three, and then the other teams that have done kind of unexpectedly well are playing the middle block, difficult to beat Portuguese style, and then occasionally spiking some pretty good runs, like a Forest this year, like a Fulham, who might be a touch better than their squad overall actually should be, based off of being systemic pains in the ass. And then the bigger one is Crystal Palace, who I think Glasner was about to be fired, and basically he switched to a back three, which is very unusual with most German managers or German style managers. And it definitely solidified them. They don't play like a German pressing team right now. They play like just a team that's decided to be difficult to beat and stay mid-table. And I don't think that that's Glasner's like long-term idea of football, but he's been flexible enough to get it done. Hurzeler on the other side is like having lots of naivety, both in his setup and his team setup. And that then has given Brighton like an underwhelming season versus the talent that they actually have.
Yeah, I mean, just to talk about that, that's kind of a difficult one, right? Because if Brighton say we are going to keep this group together and we are going to like go for something next season, having a young manager there who's still getting his reps is not conducive to making the most of that.
They have plenty of cash to make that change, right? So if they found somebody in the summertime that they loved and they know that it's really useful for them to get time. I mean, I'm a little surprised. Well, I guess they really must have loved Hurzeler. I would have thought that they'd bring Graham back. Like that Potter would have been exactly what they sort of have a squad built for now, right? Like they've got real athletes, they've got some pretty good possession based guys. They're missing like an elite center forward, and Welbeck being the best of their group is, I'm sure, painful for them. But maybe that's just like João Pedro needing another year. I know we're drifting all over the place, but these tactical things that we're talking about and the potential shift means squad differences, means transfer differences for these different teams. And if you have design, then you can save yourself some money and you can transition faster from one to the other. If you have no design, you have to chop and change from every single head coach, and you do like Manchester United have done for a long time, then you get stuck when you have a team that does not fit what the new coach's identity is, and you just suffer for however long that might be.
Yeah. Well, I think our last transfer today actually leads on quite well from what you were talking about there. You talked about Brighton centre forward, talked about Graham Potter, and it looks like Brighton are letting Evan Ferguson join West Ham on loan with an option. I couldn't actually find a number for the option, though it'd be interesting to talk to you about that. Like, clearly, it feels like they want to fatten him up to sell, given that they've also agreed this move for Timas, who's at Nuremberg this season on loan from PAOK. Ferguson has had a couple of down years, after having that incredible breakthrough as a teenager. That's not that crazy. Like, you'd expect a guy to have, maybe a step back, or he hasn't really had the consolidation year, I guess. He's had a lot of injuries. How do you rate him now, and what would you want the option to buy to be here?
First of all, you got to understand like his health, right? And having him on loan is the best way to understand that, because then you're going to pick up information about it that you might have been worried about before. So like that's pretty good. The option to buy is, so there's lots of ways to think about it. Like some cases you're looking at just base case cash, right? And base case cash, you have to be really careful because there's so much unknown. So if there's unknown, so his performance is unknown, his injury setup's unknown, like how quickly is he going to come up to speed? All these are questions, right? And if he's really good, like he sort of looked like he would be as an 18-year-old, and you can keep him healthy, then you're like, all right, this is like a 35 to 40 million pound transfer for a young guy. Like people would be like, oh, he should be more, but like he isn't that, right? Like you're looking at the 18-year-old, but you've got years of data that say that he's not purely the 18-year-old. So you've got to update your priors for that. Now, the ways that you adjust that are via appearances, via potential national team appearances. Like that's usually a clever thing to toss in. If you make the Champions League, there's another clause on there. And then the other element is you can leave less cash, but you can also have a buyback inside of it that sometimes is not officially agreed because of reasons, but it's sort of there. Or you have a sell-on clause. And that sell-on clause is probably the biggest protector of a thing. Like if you think a player has a really big upside and you want to have him as an asset to sell later, then you want the sell-on clause to be as little as possible. If you only really care about using the player for like a productive couple of years and then you're happy to ship him on, then you don't mind that sell-on clause at all. And the sell-on clauses are almost always, so say a player goes for 30 million, right? Then the sell-on clause would be, say, 50% of the additional amount beyond the 30 million. That's what that looks like. It's not like the pure cash amount that says that you get 50%, they lose an additional 15 million or something like that. So that's the way that those clauses work. And a player like Evan Ferguson that you think might still have upside, but has just endless amounts of questions about it, you got to be really careful about the upfront cash outlay. And then you find ways to build a deal that makes sense for everybody so that they're comfortable that they're getting what they want. But then the player like really needs playing time. That's a big deal.
And he's going to a coach who knows him. He's going to a coach as well who has created systems which create chances for his centre forwards. There's obviously a gap there because their strikers are Füllkrug, who we hate, and Antonio, who is very old now and has been aging out of that position for a long
I don't
time.
hate Füllkrug. I liked Füllkrug like a decade ago when I scouted him. I just only liked him a decade ago. I'm just not excited about now, and I hated the deal. Right? Like, don't give us personal animus about them. Give us animus about the inanimate objects. That's yeah.
No, you play the man, not the ball. Anyway, Evan Ferguson playing up front for West Ham. I can get on board with this. I think this is fun. There's loads of talent around him. They're going to have Bowen coming back. They've got Kudus, Paquetá, Somerville, Graham Potter. It's easy to see a world in which this works. He's a pretty solid passer as well. He played in a team where he couldn't just like shank it out of play all the time. And even when you look at his numbers when he's been bad, it's a very small sample size, but they've been fine for a teenager. He's a kid. He's only 20 now. So if you were trying to buy him, what kind of price do you think Brighton would realistically hope for in the summer?
Hope. So we always had a couple different ways of looking like this. What is his actual value, and then what is your buy and your sell, right? And in some cases, like you look at a player's skill set and you're like, we're only selling him for a bunch because like we actually think that he's worth the risk, right? And so keeping a hold of him is pretty significant. Also, the cost to replace that is a huge deal, right? That's the thing about Guehi. Like you're like, I think he's fine, but I don't think that he's one of the best center backs in world football. And 70 billion suggests that he is, right? That's and maybe he is, but also like what could we do with that cash again? So yeah, I think that they're probably looking at maybe 25 like as an outlay plus a nice sell on clause. If they get 30 to 35, they're in good shape. But like so here's the replacement effect, right? So AC Milan just bought Santiago Jimenez, right? I think that's what it is. From
Feyenoord.
From the Dutch league, and he's 23 years old, and he doesn't seem to have a lot of the weaknesses that you get for players in the Dutch league. He's been great for Feyenoord over the course of a few years. He's not just a big player that's been bullying teenage center backs. He looks like he might be legit. Now they probably paid 32 million allegedly in euros plus some sell-on clauses. That feels too much. Like if they got like sort of 22 to 25 plus clauses, like then you're sort of in a more comfortable range. But teams will just move on to somebody like that as opposed to being scared about or like getting stuck with like a big fee for an Evan Ferguson. Now, I mean, if I'm Brighton, I'm actually excited because he's going to Potter. They had a successful sort of combination before. So like you're putting him in the best possible shape to succeed, which means that if you wanted to have like clauses attached to it, you're a little more comfortable. Not to say that West Ham are like the most functional place, but
Brighton are stockpiling forwards though at a pretty insane rate right now. Like
they got to sell some at some point, right? Like at some point, you're just got the logistical upkeep on the army. Like you need to.
This is where it feels like is there a deal coming down the line that we don't know about? Kind of like the Xavi Simons thing with Leipzig, where it feels like what don't we know here? Like is have Liverpool said we're coming in for like Joao Pedro next summer, and that's what's happening because right now they've got an endless number of them. They keep getting guys.
Yeah, they've put their cash that they got for selling midfielders for 100 million to pretty good use, to be honest with you. I think Tony actually needs to just buy some more clubs and can continue to develop and stash them somehow. That's not real, by the way. I don't think that. Like, I think most multi-club ownership groups are really bad and they don't know what they're doing. But it's the type of case where if they got a really good head coach, like you could possibly convince players to come to Brighton, like as part of that. They've got like a pretty new stadium. They definitely have like, you can see that the talent pipeline is there. It feels like they're just a little short of becoming one of the big Premier League clubs. But it would take something like that too. It would take someone notable that gives them the final stake that says that, oh, this guy's a good enough head coach that they put everything together. We know that they have the recruitment pipeline that's not going to be ruined because it's based on the ownership and not by all the people that get hired from Brighton. So like that's a really good anchor. We know that they've got cash because they've sold so well. They've got real assets. And now it's about getting a great head coach in there. And it might not be Hurzeler. They probably thought it was. But Hurzeler again, really young. You've got to have the time and the reps to be able to do that. But if they got somebody notable, and I don't know who that is, we could sort of, that's a different show perhaps. Who in the future should Brighton hire to put them over the top? Yeah, if they got someone like that, like I think that you could actually sell players on that project, being like, yeah, I want to go play there because I know that I'm always going to have great talent around me.
Yeah, and it's also one of the actually nice cities to live in England, of which there are depressingly few, in my opinion.
Ooh, I had a question for you. Did you see City fans complaining about the Arsenal atmosphere at the match?
No. Right.
Yeah.
How did you find a City fan?
That's a good point. They occasionally, I think there's a bot army out there that will occasionally disguise themselves as City fans and then shout into the ether. I found it really intriguing because like, if City fans had like any self-awareness, they would look across over at Manchester United and they would look at how much joy teams took from beating Manchester United when Manchester United were dominant, right? I don't know if City fans realize this, but like you guys have been dominant for fucking ages and in ways that like very few teams have been. And it is very, very happy for many teams to be able to take their small pound of flesh and to have their like joyous moments and to have their wonderful celebrations that happen to be there. Yeah. And some of your players have incredibly large egos and incredibly large heads. And it's good to be able to have people like, want to take shots at you because you fucking deserve it.
Yes.
Not because you're evil or anything like that, but because you're the kings. Like, you've been on top for a really long time. That is part of wearing the crown, right? Like, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Teams want to take shots at you, and when they actually beat you, enjoy it. And man, like, the grudge match atmosphere of City Arsenal games is real now. Like, that's a rivalry that didn't exist a few years ago. Like, they were just brushed aside constantly. Now it's a legit thing, and that, like, it's fun for fans to look forward to it. It's fun for media to be able to play that up because it's genuinely legit. And I was paying really close attention because I had lots of friends who were working at Liverpool at the time. It didn't feel like Liverpool, Man City had that kind of grudge match atmosphere during the Klopp era. Like, everybody knew they were
Really?
two really good teams, but you never felt like they hated each other. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there's just enough element of like, simmering hatred and distaste in the Arsenal City match. You're like, yeah, I like this. The league needs this type of shit.
No, I agree. Like, it's Arsenal have it more with Liverpool than like City and Liverpool have it where it was just like too much respect for one another.
Yeah. It was.
I just want it to be. I want there to be more beef. I want it to be more exciting. Like, this is how the atmosphere gets good, by like fans actually caring about beating the other side. And Arsenal didn't celebrate like this when they beat Spurs twice this season, when they beat United. Like, they didn't really celebrate like this, but this like felt like a huge deal, and that is a compliment to City, who are, yeah, exactly. It's not because they're evil. They're like, this is kind of epiphenomenal to their evil, but like that, it's just because they've been our rivals for a while and they've been like slapping Arsenal around, so it's kind of fun.
Absolutely. And I think that it was excellent. Obviously, we're Arsenal fans, but like, I like the atmosphere of football, right? And I like we have a commentary talk show about this, and are able to do that. Like, there are other sort of second tier matches where like the teams clearly continue to hate each other despite the fact that everyone on the teams has changed. So like, Chelsea Tottenham seems to be a kick the shit out of you fest on a regular basis. It's
Yeah, I love
basically
that.
Scottish football, but happens in a London derby. And that's one that somehow has been maintained over the years. But you're right. It felt like City versus Liverpool, like, they could have gone 12 rounds in an epic fight where they beat the bejesus out of each other and then just like hugged each other at the end of it and like appreciated like what good boxers they were. There's no hugging in Arsenal City anymore, and that's great. Get the hugging out of football. Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree that like the kind of shithousery is the best bit. Like, it always makes me laugh when rugby fans or whatever complain about this, where like the behavior is so bad in football and people are screaming in each other's faces. And I was just like, that's the best bit about it. Like, screaming in someone's face after they've lost is what makes football funny. I
Theo
don't
Walcott
understand.
being carted off the pitch after another near career
Yeah,
ending injury, going 2-0. Like, these are moments that
yeah,
we
it's great.
remember. Yeah.
I agree. This has always been my issue with PSG, I think. I don't know if it's because they didn't end up actually using their academy the way they should have, given that they are in the city that produces most top footballers of all cities in the world. Um, but it felt like nobody there really cared, So like obviously they were super dominant, but like the rivalry with Marseille just turned into like nothing, and no one really gave a shit. It's just a bit
Marseille fans are
sad.
mostly fighting amongst themselves and, breaking into the training ground.
Yeah, well, it's tiring business. Okay, I think that brings us to an end for the transfer window. Like you say, we might have a special wrap up. There's still loads of stuff happening, I hope. And this was a really, really fun few days. So, season set up well, except for Aston Villa, whose bank account is going to be dry in about 3 weeks. Thank you very much for listening, for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast app, leave us a 5-star review if you've enjoyed the show. Tell us about any transfers that you want us to cover. I'm sure that if Nico Gonzalez goes through that, we'll talk about that. I imagine that we'll get to a bunch of these, but Napoli are doing weird stuff as well. So send anything you want to us, and we'll try and get to as much of it as possible over the next few weeks. But
Yeah, we have a newsletter where we've been commenting
we
on
do.
transfers pretty much like the entire time. The transferslow.com/subscribe. I'm sure that Kim and I will do some grades on sort of the prices that are reported, and we'll sort of look at some of the biggest 5 to 10 over the next couple of days. If anything big happens, we'll be back tomorrow for some real analysis. And it's not going to be things that I can't talk about with teams that I'll get in trouble with. So
Yeah, okay.
I do my best.
Yeah, we'll try and redact as little as possible. Thank you very much, and we will catch you next time. Bye-bye.
The good thing is that she's a girl and she's actually got some self-preservation instinct. If she were a boy, like she's just A&E all the time, right?
Yeah, that is weird, isn't it? It's like one of those things where no matter how much you commit to like kind of ungendered child raising, like boys throw themselves off things and want to throw balls around inside, and girls like think that that's fucking embarrassing.
I and you get boys together, right? And the funny thing is, like, you see these videos, and if you've ever been around a group of boys, like women have very rarely been around a group of boys that were not just interested in women at the time. But yeah, you're in a group of boys, and you're like, they do dumb shit all the time, especially if
Yeah.
they fucking watch like pro wrestling, right? Like the pro wrestling is the gateway drug to opening the world that says that men should do dumb shit all the time.
Yeah, or like Jackass or whatever.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think Jackass is particularly bad because it's like role modelism for things that many men would not directly discover, and then suddenly discover it, and they're like, "Oh, well, we can act like this too."
There was a version of it. I wish I could remember the name that we would watch when I was kids. Like, after Jackass, there were a bunch of like Jackass imposters that sprang up, and one of them that I remember was on like Channel 4 late at night or something, was like a bunch of guys in the arse end of Scotland trying to do Jackass, but like they had no budget. So they tried to do, the ET like cycle off the ramp thing, but the wood they used was rotten, so the guy just went straight through the ramp as he went up. But it was always like
Geordie Shore versus Jersey Shore, and you're just like,
yeah.
Wow, is this an upgrade, or because of the point is to be inverted? Is it? I don't know. Like, is it that much worse? Yeah, I don't know. I also feel like, so like different cultures have these different things. How much Japanese game shows have you watched?
Japanese game shows. The only Japanese shows I've only really watched like Terrace House and like Old Enough.
You ever watch the one like they grease a ramp and then a bunch of people?
Like, Takeshi's Castle. Yeah, you better believe it.
and like there's scads of these, right? Like floors, lava type elements and stuff like that. And I feel like the Japanese like took this instinct that people have to do like genuinely stupid things and then turned it into competitive instincts that are vaguely safe-ish, but not really.
Yeah.
And now like you still get clips that come across that effectively are ones where you're like, oh, I'd forgotten that existed because I don't watch the 1,000 channels of cable that are here every day. I wonder if you could do that for football. Like, is there a setup that you can do that, like, gets players to do genuinely stupid-ish things, but also has a skill element involved that you maybe can teach them something practical in the games? This is why I'm both useful and harmful when I'm around a club.
We used to try and do stuff like that. We used to try and like we wanted, when we were on FD, we started to get access through Sky, and we wanted to create a version of the Top Gear like star in a reasonably priced car. We were like, if we have a version of that, that's like a super easy like viral idea. And obviously every club was just like, if you injure one of our players, like we will destroy like we'll take a penny from your like descendants.
So back in the United States, there used to be these like physical fitness challenges so first of all, there was Battle of the Network Stars, right? So I don't even remember which channel broadcast this, but there were like 3 main channels, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And then somehow they convinced people, to both men and women, because it had to be 2 genders, to convince them to go through these physical fitness exercises. And they would run sprints, and they would do tug of war and like random stuff, and occasionally there'd be very attractive actresses that were in scantily clad things, whatever. This is the 80s, so who the hell knows? Soap opera people that were on there. You're like, but like one of the things you also find surprising is that like many people that are kind of network stars are genuinely good athletes because they've gone through the whole dance process.
Yeah, sure.
Like Tom Holland being like a legit athlete, and probably you're like, huh, I guess that kind of makes sense. But they also had this for like actual sports stars too, because they didn't make as much money. And so they would put them on TV in these competitions, and they could win money for charity, or they would get their appearance fees and stuff like that. And then at some point the leagues were like, this seems really dangerous. Like maybe we should not allow our people to do this. It's a shame though, because it was a lot of fun, and you used to get to see these like sort of interesting skill type games, throw a football through a ring, get a prize, that type of stuff.
But no one's like really. Okay, there are exceptions. Obviously, there are people who are like actual athletes who are actors, but then so many of them are just like like hot girl fit.
Yeah.
That it really, really gets on my tits. Like Emma, my wife, she always starts rolling her eyes whenever we're watching a film, and I'm just like, that person can't run. Like that you know when you see like Natalie Portman in a film or whatever, and I'm like, Natalie Portman, I'm sure has like a very low like body fat percentage. I guarantee that Natalie Portman cannot throw a ball like 50 meters. Like she just can't do it.
She's a genius though, so she's got that going for her.
Is she?
She is. She's really fucking smart.
She went to Harvard, but I know a lot of fucking people who went to Harvard.
She's legit smart, like
genuinely like,
legit smart.
She was kind of in with Dershowitz at that time. It's not a great sign. I also I'm biased here because I had a professor at uni who was just like who had like a personal animus against her because he'd been at Harvard at the same time as her.
Wanted to date her, and she turned him down.
I think that's basically it. Like, because he wouldn't call her Natalie Portman, he only called her like Natalie Hurzeler, you know. And I was just like, oh, you're dead naming her. Oh my god,
yeah.
Like, yeah, it was deep. That was deep in the bones hatred. But there's no hatred that that stays in your bones like one for someone who rejected you when you were like 19, I think.
Occasionally Spencer Hall, who's one of the best follows on the internet, will have like these random threads, and one recently was like most disconcerting actor that got bulked, right? I think Kumail Nanjiani was one where you're just like, Kumail's looking real weird here. And like when you see his interviews and you hear his voice and then you look at him in the buff and you're like, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like I have really serious like discombobulation about how, he's not supposed to look like that. And obviously through the magic of performance enhancing drugs and full-time trainers, you too could potentially look just like that. I've never wanted to.
You don't want your jaw to like come out like this?
I like the fact that my penis is operational. I don't really want to endanger that in any way.
Okay. Well,
I think that's a good minimum bar for men. Like, is your penis operational? Like, this is positive.
Fully operational, yeah. I mean, like, the thing I would...
like the fucking Death Star?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking, but I didn't want to say it. I realized that we were filming, so I stopped. I will say that he's remained funny, though.
Oh, he's great.
I thought that I was like, now you're buff. I don't think you'll be... So, you know, like, when Eric Bana was in Australian films when he was a kid, and he was fucking amazing, and then he got really hot, and he turned into like the dullest leading man of all time in American movies.
And you didn't even realize he was a good actor. Like he was perfectly capable of being like the Ryan Reynolds but with a better accent. But no.
But I think there's something about the accent there. Like, so I think that when Eric Bana is Australian, he can be good. And similarly, Chris Hemsworth, I was like, I've got nothing against Chris Hemsworth. He's fine. Like, but in Furiosa last year, I was like, finally, they're going to give him a prosthetic nose. They're going to let him be Australian. And it was like career best, Chris Hemsworth playing a demented Australian. Like, that is all because Australians as well, like, there's no gradation. So like
they're constantly unhinged.
All Australians are 100% Australian at all times. Like, whereas, you know, you can meet people from places where you're like, you don't really feel like American. You don't really feel like British or whatever.
Meeting a real South African, you're like, whoa. I'm not going to explain that.
No, it's fine. Like I said to my wife again, is always like, you need to remember that when you talk about Southern Africans, like you're from a family of white Southern Africans. So when you say like white South Africans are the most racist, evil people on the surface of the earth, they don't know that you say it with like love. And I was just like, but they are. They are the worst people on earth.